Another thing we've touched on, well, not on camera, but off the camera, it's something you obviously give a bit of thought to, is fishing off of your baited area. Was that something that came from observation or just thinking?
No, it came from two lines of thought, I guess. The first thing, as a kid, I had a fish pond, and I could put food on the shelf, was about 3 feet deep, and I'd put food down there, and the fish would come in, and as we see on underwater films, lots now, they come in and they're feeding on that spot. And you're watching that thinking, well, they're going to be tricky to hook because they're not moving about much. They're feeding on the bottom. They'll start hoover, may blow a little bit, hoover, and then they come up and then they swim off to chew up the food. So they don't tend to sit on the spot chewing. You do get, sometimes you see that, but in my experience, 9 times out of 10, a fish will come in on the spot, hoover up a bit of food, and then go off to chew it, go off on a bit of a route, and you'll see his head go and he'll be chewing round, and you might blow a bit of rubbish out, and then he'll come back round and then have another little feed, little trough. And particularly I think that happens when there's a few fish on the spot, because I think if you're chewing your food up, you want to be out of the way a little bit of space. Then you can go back into the trough for a bit more food. So I was watching fish doing this, and then I worked out quite quickly, but there was one fish in particular. He'd come in and he'd just sit there on the bottom, just hardly moving, and then he'd come up and then he'd swim off. But if I put some, let's say a couple of grains of sweet corn along the shelf of this pond, and we're only talking a garden pond here, but it was a replication of what might happen in a fishery. He'd come round and he'd drop down and go, oh, there's a bit, pick it up. And as he was moving towards the spot, he'd drop down, pick it up and carry on. So he'd never stop moving. And all that I understood at that point in my sort of dynamics of how a rig works is if a fish is moving confidently and positively forward, it makes the rig work better. It hooks the fish better because he's travelling. If a fish is on the spot and it picks up even the best rig in the world and goes, oh, that hurt, that's sharp, blows the hook out. And even with the sharpest hooks in the world, I know they go in further perhaps, but if the fish doesn't move, that dislodges the rig and then swims away. But if a fish is travelling, goes, oh, there's a bit of food, boom, carries on. As his inertia as he's moving forward, it's like a super tanker in the sea, isn't it? They don't stop on a sixpence. They have to start braking about an hour before they want to stop. He's moving, he sucks it up and bang, the rig's poof. And then of course he's much harder for it to stop then. So I think if you can get fish to feed where they're moving about more, that's better. So that was one thing I noticed. At the same time, I remember Colin Davison, we were at one of the, I think it was Birmingham NEC, talking, fishing shows, and I think Frank Warwick had bought out his pink pop-ups. And Colin was like, you got to try these, and I'd heard about Frank catching fish on pink pop-ups, and thinking, well, just fish them as a single hook bait. It's a visual thing. I was thinking, fluorescent pink, there's a lot in your head. You go, no, there's no way. But I tried them and caught fish quite quickly on them, but from easy lakes, and then I went to Rosebery and had some bites. I lost the first couple, but I thought it works. And then I started fishing at Rosebery a little bit where I was using singles, and then when you first go out 120 yards and drop a single hook bait onto a little channel between the weed, and it goes off the next morning, and you've only got 30 or 40 fish or whatever in 100 acres, you think that works, and that gives you the confidence to think, then well, actually, that's a really effective way of catching a fish, because he's not sitting on the bottom feeding. It's just, oh, there's something, I could eat that. Put that with the first bit about the moving fish, and you think, okay, well, that makes more sense, where it could work really well. The other thing I think is that when you put bait in a spot, and I see this at the farm, I've seen it in garden ponds, I've seen it at fisheries, when a carp comes in, they're greedy things, particularly if there's a few of them. If they hit the spot on the bottom, there's this carpet of food, they think, God, this is good. And they start hoovering up, and then they end up with a huge mouthful, which they can't really process, but there's the greedy, like, oh, if I don't eat it, my mate's going to eat it. So they come off the spot, and they're literally like that, they're full of food. And what you notice is they go off, often you'll see they're spilling bits of bait. They can't chew what they've got in because they haven't got enough room to breathe and chew. So they'll drop a few baits. So suddenly you think, well, actually, they're almost pre-baiting with singles for you as they go off, aren't they? They're going out from let's say this is your bait area, and you've got a couple of kilos of boilies there. They come in, have a few, swim off 20 yards, and as they go in, they drop one there and drop one there, drop one there, and then they start chewing up. When they get a sensible amount in their mouth, they can process it, chew that up, and then come back round again. So now you've got a boilie over there, and one over there, and one over there, and those boilies aren't in the danger zone. So fish are picking up those singles going, these are fine. When I go on the tabletop, I know it's a risky game. I'm hungry, I like the food, it smells fantastic, but I know I'm also going to get clipped around the ear if I steal too much. So those single baits potentially represent an easy freebie, if you like.
Yeah.
So yeah, I tried them at, the Raisbury and Court, and then I fished them elsewhere. And we mentioned off camera earlier, but when I was sort of trying to think, right, if I was ever going to catch the Burfield Common, which, when you're there and fishing, you think it's never going to happen, even if you're catching a few. I remember trying fishing 20 yards off a baited spot, just fishing a single brown fish meal, 20 yards on the bottom, 20 yards off a baited spot. And I thought, well, I'm confident that they're eating the bait, but I'm not getting bites. I'm seeing the odd fish show, maybe dodgy rigs, whatever. But I put a rig 20 yards off it, and I had one almost immediately. And by the morning, I had a couple of 30-pounders off on a single, and you think, you sneaky fish.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is,
and you could try it there, and it worked. So it's always like, this right-hand rod, and bizarrely, it's the rod that's done the bite. The spot that I've been told was straight out, and that rod is probably 20 yards to the right of it, and it's getting a nice drop. And I think, well, maybe that's a spot they're not so familiar with finding rigs on, perhaps. I don't know, but I think it
gives you a bit of perspective, doesn't it, when you have results like that? Because you're fishing a massive Great Lake, renowned to be hard. There's not a huge stock for the size of it, and then you do something a little bit different, and it makes all the difference. A bit like what you're saying about the sharpened hooks as well.
Well, that was I'd had a couple of hook pulls again at Burfield, and the setup I was using was industrially strong. I thought it's going to, you're not fishing there for little ones, are you? You want to land it if you hook it. So, and I had a couple of hook pulls, and I thought, this isn't working. And I've said this before on podcasts. I had a prototype packet of Kamakura wide gapes, and I tried it. I thought, they're bloody sharp. And I had a hook. I was bringing a fish in December, cold. I was up to my chest in cold water. This fish is coming across the top towards me, and it was all over. The lead had rejected, and the fish is just there, coming in like that, and then the rig come out, went over my shoulder, like, oh no! And then that moment as it sort of sinks away, and you're like, December, you lost the good one. And I thought, right, that's it. That's just happened too many times. I've had too many issues with that pattern, the way I'm fishing. It's maybe wrong, maybe it's the braid. So I thought, right, I've spoken to Elliot Gray, and I've spoken to Adam Penning, and they both said, why are you using those? Use those wide gapes, use the wide gapes. And I'd always used wide gapes in the past and found them brilliant. But I think I just thought, this is going to be a stronger, better way to fish it, and it wasn't. I reeled all 3 rods in, put them back out, and it was like Billingsgate. It was like the super sharp hooks, and I'd suddenly catch, I was catching.
It just shows you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That you must have been getting done left, right.
Yeah, I think I was being done left, right, and centre. Yeah, dodgy rigs. But I think little changes, whether it's a bait change or a positional change, it's worth doing.
Even like line angles.
Yeah, definitely.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
What are you thinking then, Si?
Well, I'm thinking we should go to the pub.
Oh, let's have a look. He's in. Yes.
It's exciting, a bite.
That will do nicely, Joe. That will do nicely.
That was exciting.
God, I'm all shaking. That's a proper fish.
Is it?
It's a proper carp.
I've genuinely got no idea what this is going to weigh. Well, that happens to me so rarely. It is. I'm pretty confident this one started life in a glass bowl under my fingertips. That was like, okay, I can take my foot off the gas now a little bit and enjoy life. I remember Adam Penning saying to me, he said, oh God, do you want to come and do maybe a couple of nights social? I was like, I can't, Adam, I can't not be at Burfield.